Welcome to the 2 Deep NFL podcast. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can be a part of the conversation live. We record and stream live when we do, usually on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Central. So you can be a part of the conversation. We see your comments, you can ask questions, chat along with all the rest of the viewers, listeners for the 2 Deep podcast. Chadiha, Eager, Petro with you here. A lot to cover. The Eagles get a win in the biggest game of the year. They win on Monday Night Football at Kansas City. What does this mean for their chances of winning the Super Bowl? What does the loss mean for the Chiefs? Did the Steelers wait too long to finally fire Matt Canada as their offensive coordinator? Tom Brady said there's a lot of mediocrity in the NFL right now. Is he right? What took the Jets so long to finally bench Zack Wilson? Can the Broncos actually make the playoffs? Will Myles Garrett break the sack record Joe Burrow's done for this season? How long is that Super Bowl window actually open for the Cincinnati Bengals? And what are we looking for in Week 12? We break it all down right now here on the 2 Deep NFL podcast.
You're listening to the 2 Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. 2 Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. 2 Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the 2 Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And welcome here to the 2 Deep Podcast, breaking down all things NFL. We do it each and every week here on the 2 Deep Podcast. And Jeff, let's start with the game of the century, of the year at least, maybe not of the week, but it was a big one. ESPN was promoting it really before even the previous Monday Night Football game came about. Did it live up to its billing? First of all, was this the two best teams in the NFL that we saw on Monday night?
Well, it was the two best teams. I don't know if it lived up to its billing. I mean, I think about 3 quarters of the way through it, like one team had 60 yards passing, the other team had 20 yards passing. So it wasn't like I was, oh man, this is shades of greatness here. But, you know, look, I think it was indicative of the way this league is right now. You saw 2 really good quarterbacks, 2 excellent quarterbacks, 2 really good teams that are trying to work through their own problems. And it was a good fight. It didn't go the way the Chiefs wanted it to go. There were some red flags exposed on both sides of the football, to be honest with you. I was amazed at how much the Eagles got pushed around. I was amazed that the Chiefs receivers kept dropping passes in key situations. So that's why it wasn't great to me. But in terms of theater, what you've seen throughout the entire year, yeah, I mean, there's not many games right now that you would say that you've seen this entire season that you would say compared to it.
Eric, what's your takeaway? What does this mean for the Eagles? Are they the team to beat now? Is it their Super Bowl? You're fond of putting it that way. I think it's a great way to put it. Is this their Super Bowl now?
I think so. I think that there's some chance the Chiefs come back and make this thing, they're definitively good in the AFC, and the AFC is better than the NFC. Right now, the odds are about the same. So I think that's that can certainly be, they could construe that as the favorite. But I think the Eagles right now have shown that they can win knockout, drag out games with other elite teams in the NFL, like Dallas, like Kansas City. And as such, they are probably the best team in the NFL right now.
Yeah. What about from the other perspective, Jeff? The Kansas City Chiefs. How much of does this make you think that they, are maybe not as far out in front, or maybe not even the leader in the AFC?
Well, they're still the leader in the AFC. I mean, if I'm betting on anybody, I'd bet on them right now, given their track record and the quarterback and the coach. The biggest hit they took last night wasn't so much the loss; it was the vulnerability. It was that once again, opposing teams can say, "Yeah, we can get these guys now. Like they're not as good as they've been in the past. They'll make some mistakes. They'll get frustrated, and they don't have enough big play or just not big play, just consistent threats on offense to scare you." And so I've always said that when you are a defensive player and you're facing an offense, the thing that's going to worry you most is somebody who scares you. And so if it's Randy Moss on the other side, or if it's Marshall Faulk or Barry Sanders or Tyreek Hill, whoever it is, Patrick Mahomes, it's going to scare you. And the more guys you got to scare you, the more problems you got. Right now, the Chiefs have one guy who scares you. And in a lot of ways, he's like Superman who's playing with kryptonite every week. Every time he goes out there, all his superpowers get negated every time the ball leaves his hand. So, yeah, I think they've got to figure that part out. They're still a really good team. They're still a team that can win a championship, but the road to get there became a lot harder because of what happened last night.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, do you see anyone that you like in the AFC more so? Baltimore's the one that's got the better record. They're technically the 1 seed right now. It's not the Bengals without Joe Burrow. The Bills did finally seem to find themselves with a new offensive coordinator. Anyone you like, maybe not record-wise, the Chiefs are going to be in the number 2 spot right now, but anyone you look at and you go, I know early, before the season, you and I both like the Bills. Anyone you like better than Kansas City in the AFC?
Yeah, I mean, there were some reports last week that Trevor Lawrence's knee was worse than it really was. A lot of professional bettors bet against Jacksonville and, on Lawrence's unders, and he looked fantastic. In fact, the best fantasy performance in the NFL by an offense was by Jacksonville. You couple that with the fact that, top 10 defense, the guy that my boss, Thomas Dimitroff, drafted, Foye Oluokun, is like one of the best linebackers in the NFL. They have Josh Allen doing things off the edge. They have a great coach, and they're battling through some offense. If the offense has had problems, right? And then Sunday they got Ridley on the board. Kirk is still pretty good. Zay Jones is injured, but and then Travis Etienne. I think the Jaguars are a legitimate threat for the Chiefs, and they're probably 4th behind, in my opinion, Buffalo, Baltimore, and Kansas City. But yeah, you really do have to care about the Jaguars.
We'll get Eric's opinion on this here in a second, Jeff, but I'm going to bring up something that Eric's talked about a lot this year, and that's that Jalen Hurts doesn't look the same. You mentioned how low the passing total was for the Eagles. The Chiefs were able to take A.J. Brown out. That's something nobody else in the league. He was already over 1,000 yards, headed towards 1,900 yards on the season. That was the pace he was on. And he was kind of a sitting duck. The Chiefs sacked him 5 times in the first half. Yes, the Eagles win. Yes, they're the 1 seed. Yes, they have the best record. But this was not like a coming out party for Jalen Hurts MVP candidacy. Is that a bigger concern than maybe people realize, even though it looks so good at 9-1?
Yeah, I get a little bit confused by people who are saying he's the leader right now in the MVP race because the performances don't say that. I mean, he's had some good games in there, and they've got the best record. So yeah, that gives you some stature there. But you watched last night, and for a long point in that game, he was really controlled. And the big thing with him, and it's I think he can run when he wants to run, when they want him to run. It's not as big an aspect of his game this season. And it's what made him special last year, was that he was so cavalier about the way he ran the football and the dimension he gave that team. And when he wanted to run last night, obviously the big scoring run he had late in the game or in the fourth quarter was a big, or excuse me, in the third quarter was a big play for them. He ran it late when they had to run the clock out, or were trying to run the clock out. And so if he gets back to doing more of that stuff, I think that he'll be more of an MVP candidate. But it's just numbers wise, I don't see, especially with the turnovers he's had, I don't see where he's at that point.
Eric, he does have 24 touchdowns this year, 9 of them rushing, 15 passing. I mean, he is a big part of the brotherly shove, the tush push,
Yeah.
in the way he, his leg strength and his squatting. I'm not trying to take anything. He's a weapon, but 1 yard touchdown runs, setting a record for 1 yard touchdown runs is usually not the recipe for winning an MVP. I'm with Jeff. I don't mind him being in that conversation. By the way, he has 35 rushing touchdowns now since he entered the league in 2020, and he's now in front of Cam Newton's pace for most touchdowns in a quarterback's first 4 seasons. And he's still got, 7 games to go this year. But to give you an idea, his touchdown production with his legs is surpassing Cam Newton, who's the greatest, running touchdown guy in quarterback history in the National Football League. So, yes, I have no problem with people bringing up his name, but I'm with Jeff. The idea that he is the MVP of this league, that's a bit of a stretch. You've been talking about how you don't see him as dynamically. And there were times that he seemed to almost just kind of squat and wait for the sack, against the Chiefs. What did you see on Hurts specifically in this game?
Yeah, to me, he is the favorite in the betting market. So that's something. I think he's become a better thrower. But when he scrambles out to the design runs, he's fine because he gets downhill and everything like that. But for me, what's really interesting is sort of what happens when, he scrambles, because that's when, it's sort of the undesigned movements for me are really where he looks like he struggles. So I'm on board. Look, he's done a good job as far as, continuing to lead that team despite his own limitations, which I think we all can see. But he's not a perfect quarterback, and in a perfect world, I think there's some other quarterback who's MVP.
Yeah, or it's not a quarterback. This is the year that a non-quarterback steps in and wins it because you don't have a dynamic performance. Offense is down, defense is stronger this year. Why not give it to a great defensive player this year? I think that may be the mindset. Jeff's talked a lot about there's a difference between who is the most valuable player and who people vote for sometimes. And so what are we talking about here? Who they're going to vote for or who actually is it? There's 2 different conversations to have there. So it will be interesting. By the way, always interesting to make sure that your parking lot is taken care of. Gann Asphalt and Concrete can do it. Proud sponsors of the 2 Deep NFL podcast. Free consultations, no commissions. In-house crews, every project, it comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt can keep your parking lot safer, help you and your business focus on business itself. Avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Let Gann Asphalt and Concrete give you a perfect parking lot. GannAsphalt.com. All things parking lot. One contractor. It's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. The Pittsburgh Steelers made a move with their offensive coordinator, Jeff, and this is with Kenny Pickett. They gave him the keys. He's the guy, and they're winning overall, although they've been outgained in every single game. I don't know how you do this.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Yeah, they've been doing it. But when you look at the stats for Kenny Pickett, no one's ever thrown fewer touchdowns and started as many games as he has this early in his career. He's out there, but he's not really doing anything. Did it all get fixed because they made this move? Should this move have happened a long time ago?
It should have happened a long time ago. And I understand why Mike Tomlin didn't do it, because he's a very loyal guy, and that's an organization that sticks with people probably longer than they probably need to. But if you've got a second-year quarterback and you're thinking about changing a system, or at least changing the play caller, I think it behooves you more to do this in the offseason, where you have a chance to allow people to get comfortable, for a relationship to get built. I mean, it's one thing to do it with Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey in Buffalo, but Josh Allen's been playing for 6-7 years now, and so it's not like he's some newbie. When you're talking about a guy like Kenny Pickett, who was just trying to figure out how to play in this game, doesn't have a ton of weapons on the outside. It almost feels as if someone told Mike Tomlin, get rid of the guy. It's time to get rid of it. It's not working out, but it is too little, too late, and it feels as if. Again, they're not going to sustain what they've been doing, but it feels like when Najee Harris was in the locker room talking about this after the last game, I don't know if you saw the clips, but he was basically like, "We just can't keep doing this. This is, I'm a soldier here, but what we're doing here is not going to get us anywhere." And so it almost feels as if the players were starting to bark a little bit, and that had to catch Mike Tomlin's eye as well.
Listen, no one in Pittsburgh is trying to say that Kenny Pickett is or should be Patrick Mahomes, but I'm going to give you a comparison. First 17 starts for Patrick Mahomes, he threw 50 touchdowns, right? 50. Kenny Pickett right now, do you know how many starts he's made? 23.
I want to say 16.
23. 13. Wow. Yeah, 13 last year, 10 this year. How many touchdowns he got?
13.
13 touchdowns in 23.
Matt Ryan has more touchdown passes since the start of last year.
The Cowboys DBs have more touchdowns than Pickett has thrown this year. Listen, 13 TDs, 13 INTs. It's not going well. What took so long, Eric?
It's just history, right? This is the first time since 1941 that they fired a coach in the middle of the season. Mike Tomlin is, loyal to probably a fault here. That's probably it, right? I mean, that's, Pickett also not wanting to but they should be more quick to fire, the coaches if they make, Kenny Pickett look bad because, Pickett obviously is the guy that they're running with as a draft pick. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that, part tradition, part, the fact that they don't want to disrupt Kenny Pickett has led to all of this.
Yeah. I don't, does anybody see a big turnaround coming for the Steelers? Like as far as offensively, or do you see that, all this, God bless Mike Tomlin and his ability to figure out a way to win these kind of games, but that there is an avalanche coming and it's going to look like it's going to be a lot of losses.
They're not a playoff team. And they may have a winning record, but they're not going to be a playoff team, just as was the case last year. And the problem that I see them having is, they're an organization that has, even Ben to a certain extent was an outlier in this way, but they're not an organization who's really building around quarterbacks. They don't want to play that style of football. They don't want to have like what Mahomes is, what Josh Allen is, where it's just, here's this stud QB and he's flinging it all over the place. People remember Ben Roethlisberger as becoming that, but started his career, he was handing off a lot. He was throwing the ball 20, 25 times a game. And then Tomlin got there. Then all of a sudden they had Mike Wallace and Antonio Brown and these other guys started to develop. And it was high flying for a while, but it feels as if they're stuck in this weird place of what are we going to be offensively? Are we going to be that kind of offense and get more George Pickens type guys? Or are we going to get more Najee Harris's and Jalen Wallace's and build our offensive line back up and play action to death and be closer to what the Ravens, what the Steelers, what the Browns have become, and be that kind of an offense? So I think that's where who they hire as OC will tell you a lot about what they want from Kenny Pickett.
Eric, they finish the year at Seattle and at the Ravens, 2 road games against 2 winning teams. But between now and then, at the Bengals, now without Joe Burrow, Cardinals at home, Patriots at home, at the Colts, home for the Bengals. I mean, that is a stretch where you can, maybe go 4-1 and need a split out of those last 2 to get to 11 wins. Is this a playoff team when the year's over?
Yeah. Mike Tomlin's voodoo combined with, the bump from getting rid of Canada. I do think it's going to be enough to beat some of those kind of sorry teams on their schedule for sure.
Tom Brady says there's a lot of mediocrity in the NFL right now. Is he right, Eric?
No. This is a guy who made a career off of beating Chad Pennington, Kellen Clemens, Cleo Lemon, Jay Fiedler, Sage Rosenfels. I mean, I'm going to late list.
What's your friend for Sage Rosenfeld?
Trent Edwards, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Do we need to say more? This guy made his career off of horseshit quarterbacks in the AFC East. What are we talking about?
What was the question you asked, Jeff? I didn't hear what you said.
I thought Eric was friends with Sage Rosenfeld.
I am friends with Sage. Sage knows exactly who he was in the NFL, which is a good backup quarterback.
That'd be Eric's friend when he starts talking about guys making their careers.
So
Petro was an 8 out of 10 Midwest sports talk. I'm just kidding. You're at least a 9 out of 10, Petro.
Oh, gee, thanks. I'll take it. I'll bank that right now. Listen, if so your point is not that there isn't plenty of mediocrity. Your point is that there's always been mediocrity. And he wasn't just talking about the quarterbacks. He was talking about all of it.
But actually, defense in the NFL right now is having a day. You look at Cleveland, like, I'm sorry, but Tom never played with a defense that had Myles Garrett, Denzel. Like, he didn't play with as good of a defense as Cleveland has right now.
Yeah, I think the point he was
Myles Garrett kind of guy. Like, I mean, the league, it's just different right now. It sucks because the quarterbacks are hurt. I'll give him that. But, like, the defenses in the NFL are pretty damn good, man. Like, we watched this in Kansas City, and, like, I actually, gun to my head, would I rather the 2018 team than the 2023 team? The 2023 team. Because at least I know if Mahomes throws an interception to the end zone, they're going to get a stop at one point, right? So I just disagree with Tom. I think the sloppiness is on the offensive side of the ball majority, for the first time in a while. But I think defenses they're good. They're legitimately good, I think.
Yeah, I think the point that I took away from what he was saying was the player development is not what it used to be. And so you're getting a lot more guys who are taking longer to play at a high level. And so I do agree with that. There is the element of get off my lawn, old guy. Game was great when I played. Look what it is now. What am I watching? There is an element of that to this. But there is a valid point to be made about, and I think you said it, there's a lot of college teams out there, but a lot of college programs. And so just the way the college game is, you're seeing more and more kids bounce around. And when they come into the league, they're not ready to play. And so you get situations where kids take longer to, like, I want to say Sky Moore is an example of this, but somebody like FAU maybe, or somebody who is, I'm trying to think of somebody like Boya Mafe is somebody's a good example of this. A guy who in Seattle who's had a really good second year, but when he came out of Minnesota, he was not a super polished product. George Karlaftis was in that same category. David Ajabo from Michigan. There's a lot of guys who, especially pass rushers and corners and receivers, they just go out and run around now. They don't really have to have a lot of accountability to their craft. And so when they start playing in the league, they have to start doing things at a higher level. It takes a little bit longer to actually play at a high level. So that's the only point I saw that he made that was really valid. But there was a lot of old man complaining going on.
I wonder if it's – yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Even down to, like, kickers, man. Like, punters and kickers are so much better now than when Tom played. But, when Tom started, like, the coordinators are scheming up some cool stuff. Like, I get what he's saying. And actually, Jeff, I do agree with the player development thing is a huge issue. It's something that's neglected in the NFL. But the gameplay is better than it was when Tom was winning his first few Super Bowls.
The thing that I would wonder is, and I think those are all valid points, and guys jumping around, are they not being, as developed as well? Or is the opposite true? Is the athleticism so good? First of all, everything's cyclical. So, this idea that we were headed towards, I think they're back in 18, 19, maybe even 20, this idea that we were headed towards arena football, right? Like, get 2 stops in a game and you're going to win because we're headed to 77 to 68 scores. I think we found that, no, defense catches up. And at some point, the offense will turn the corner and they'll get going. But I wonder if the opposite from a personnel standpoint is almost true, that they're all really good. So you get more stalemates, right? You don't have one wideout. You don't have a team of just absolute dregs defensively. So wideouts have all these big games. And you don't have a team that has no receivers. So, defenses dominate. That there's just a little bit more of a standoff right now. This is what, iron sharpens iron. This is iron on iron right now in the NFL. There's good defensive players. There's good offensive players. There's a balance right now. And he looks at it through an offensive lens.
Well, and it's also, look, players don't practice as much anymore. They don't practice as much in college. They don't practice as much in the pros. When I started covering the NFL 25 plus years ago, I mean, when you had OTAs, training camp was 2 practices a day for like six weeks. It was just, you spent a lot of time on the field working on your craft. And that's just nowadays. I mean, guys disappear and they come back and they run around in shorts and T-shirts for a few weeks and they disappear again. And so it does take a lot longer to build some kind of cohesiveness, some kind of consistency in what you do. And so that's, if anything, that's probably the biggest thing he didn't raise in the whole argument was that, hey, your union asked for more time away from the game. If you get more time away from your job, you're going to get a good-looking product in the end.
Yeah, I agree. Making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. That's GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Don't risk accidents, liabilities in your parking lot. Get your lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on those accidents. Keep your parking lot much safer and keep you focused on your business. Go to GANasphalt.com. That's GANasphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot, GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Let's talk a little bit about the Jets. Eric, what the hell took so long for them to eject on Zack Wilson?
Well, I do you just think that they looked at this season and said it doesn't really matter? Like everything that they wanted to accomplish went out the window when Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles because, their defense was so good, but offensive line was horrendous to go into the year, and then they've only gotten worse. Wide receivers are Garrett Wilson and a bunch of Aaron Rodgers' friends. Tight end position, no one great. And, they brought in Dalvin Cook, which they knew couldn't have worked, along with Breece Hall. And once Aaron Rodgers popped his Achilles, I feel like what the Jets wanted to do is run away and hide, and they forgot that they had like 8 primetime games. And so they kept starting Zack Wilson under like the guides of if he breaks out, then our regime looks less dumb. Like it was a regime play, right? Like if Zack Wilson breaks out, we actually look pretty good. Right now we look like idiots because we put all this into Rodgers. He got hurt and we have nothing to show for it 3 years into the regime. So the Zack Wilson thing was the one last, like, I got 3 chips left. I'm going to make one more bet. And it didn't work. And the fact that their defenses continue to play this well and keep them in the thick of the AFC playoff race, at least until a couple weeks ago, was probably part of what contributed to it as well.
Come on, this is criminal. Like this is the grounds. This people get fired for doing this.
But don't you think they think they're getting fired anyway, Soren?
No, I don't think so. And I'm not convinced that they will. I think they feel like their actions are those of a guys who felt like the season didn't matter. They're all coming back because they're going to be judged on what they do with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. And so, no, I don't think there's any urgency in what they're doing, or somebody would have stood on a table and said, we're not bringing this guy back. And we sure as hell are not playing him.
Yeah, they tried to play it both ways with bringing Rodgers in to be their savior and also keeping Zach around as an example of how smart they were when they drafted him. And let's keep in mind, this is the second straight time they've had a top 3 pick and failed to make it work with the quarterback, with Sam Darnold being the first guy. Different regime, but Eric's right. When you're the GM and you're the head coach and you're telling your owner, this is the kid we believe in, and you've got to put him out there and show him that you were smart enough to take this kid, it's hard to give up on some of that stuff. We see that in Kansas City all the time with Andy Reid on a lower level with some of the guys he's got playing receiver. He's not giving up on these people because we brought them in, we believe in them, we think they can play. But I agree with you, Soren. It's if you really were going to have this be your season to really make a huge jump in the AFC power structure, you go out and you get a quarterback you can trust in case things go bad. That's why the Detroit Lions went out and waited for Teddy Bridgewater to sign with them, because they felt like, you know what, it's great to have Jared and we feel good about this team, but if he gets hurt, we're going to be screwed. So we want somebody in here who can play. And I don't know why more teams aren't doing that. Now, maybe Aaron Rodgers didn't want to have anybody in there who could be competitive, but you look at what Josh Dobbs has been doing in Minnesota for the last 2 weeks. That had to speed up the process with getting Zack Wilson off the field, because they look like idiots for not going and getting him or somebody who could play at a competent level for the most of the season.
First round quarterbacks taken by the New York Jets. Since Joe Namath went 1-1 in 1965. Ken O'Brien, and I'm going to go from bottom to top. Ken O'Brien, 24th in the quarterback class of 1983, threw 128 touchdowns, 98 interceptions. Chad Pennington, not bad, 18, threw 102 touchdowns, 64 interceptions in his career. Richard Todd.
Oh, yeah.
6 overall, 124 touchdowns, 161 picks. Mark Sanchez, 86 TDs, 89 interceptions. Sam Darnold, 3, 61 touchdowns, 55 INTs. He's the brilliant pick of the bunch. And Zack Wilson, 21 touchdowns, 25 interceptions. He went number 2 overall. They have not, they had one great year, a couple of great years with Joe Namath. Otherwise, this team has never had really strong quarterback play. Like, it's staggering how bad they are at the position.
Yeah, it's and that's why they haven't made the playoffs since 2011. They haven't won the division since 2002, and they really have never really been. I guess they had the conference title games with Sanchez, but you're not talking about a contender in the NFL there. So yeah, it's very. I can understand why after going to the well for Darnold and then going to the well for Wilson, they went in on somebody like Rodgers. It's just unfortunate. It hasn't worked out yet.
All right.
Go ahead. I was going to say, what's interesting about that whole thing, and I always think back to Rod Graves, who's now with the NFL, who used to be the Arizona Cardinals general manager. And when Kurt Warner got there, back when they had drafted Matt Leinart, and Matt Leinart was going downhill, and Kurt Warner was starting to ascend again with his second or third franchise at the time. I remember him saying to me, I never really knew what a quarterback looked like until Kurt Warner walked into this building. And I guarantee there's a lot of GMs out there who operate with the same idea. Look at the measurables, look at the stats, look at the film, but there's something about the way a guy handles himself, the way he approaches the job that separates. And until you see it in person, obviously the Chiefs have with Mahomes, until you see it in person, you can spend a whole lot of time chasing your tail.
Do you think the opposite is true, though, too? Do you think, like, George Seifert never knew what it was like not to have a quarterback?
Yeah.
So then when he took the Carolina job, he was, like, just in over his head because he always had, like, Joe Montana, Steve Young, guys like that. And then when he got to Carolina, it was just a joke. And then he's just like, I feel like that, like, I even think about that with, like, Thomas, my boss, right? His first draft pick's Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan misses 1.5 games his whole tenure there, and like he's never had to be a general manager without a quarterback. It's sort of interesting.
Can I echo this? I put this up earlier from Terry. Can you get the Jets off the national TV games, the standalone games? I mean, I'd rather watch Maction. Give me a good Mac.
Maction's good though.
I know. Give me a 3-8 MAC team against a 4-7 MAC team over watching the Jets play football. They're absolutely disgusting. The flip side of that is, how about 7 touchdowns, no interceptions in winning 4 consecutive games against a mediocre Packer team at 7-3, a still very good Chiefs team, a 6-4 Buffalo Bills team, and a Vikings team that sees itself as a playoff team. I'm talking about the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson. On the year, he is riding 19 touchdowns and just 4 interceptions. I mean, quiet as it's kept, Russell Wilson's back, Jeff.
Yeah, and nobody wants to talk about it. It's crazy that he should be in the MVP conversation the way this is going. I mean, if they're able, it's wide open. Why not him? Yeah. But look, I feel good for the guy. I was one of the people who was saying there's no way he's going to be as bad as he was for a second straight year in Denver with, just by getting rid of some of the things that were around him, including the head coach. But he's a gamer, and he got in better shape. He took Sean Payton's criticism, gave up some of the stuff that he was dealing with last year that were distractions, and he got better, and also the defense, which was historically bad for whatever the first 4 games of the season. Vance Joseph got back in the lab. They got rid of some dudes that were not getting with the program, and they got better. And look, I thought Sean Payton would be a good coach for them. And the first 3-4 weeks, I thought it was a huge mistake for me to think that. But now it's coming back to the way they've won games and the way they battled through some of these teams. Like when they beat the Chiefs, it was like, that's kind of a fluky thing, bad day. Mahomes has the flu. They might be a playoff team now. Like legitimately might be a playoff team.
Well, and yeah, if people aren't aware, right now they're tied with the Bengals and the Colts at 5-5. The Bengals are 11. We assume that they're going to just crash and burn now with Joe Burrow. But the Broncos hold the 10 seed right now. Colts 9 seed at 5-5. Bills the 8 seed at 6-5, and I do think that they've got the ship righted but they've got a head-to-head win against the Bills. Like that game was a giant game in the tiebreaker strategy. But the Steelers are 6-4 and the Texans are 6-4. That's your 7-6 seed. The Browns are I mean, they have a 5th round rookie who can't throw the ball. He's more of a running back than anything playing quarterback. They are 7-3, but I don't know how long that can last.
No.
They would seem to have both they and the Steelers look like there's a lot of losses coming their way. So it's not shocking to think, Eric, that the Denver Broncos are going to be, like Jeff said, a playoff team the way they're playing right now. Do you expect them to be a playoff team?
I had Denver in the playoffs preseason, as you guys know. I'm gonna fade it a little bit right now. Denver's 10th in the NFL in EPA, so expected points added, delta on turnovers, meaning they're getting more points than they're giving up. That is not particularly stable from week to week and stuff like that. So,
but how much of that is pulled down to
Miami?
Well, by the Miami game,
that wasn't.
Their early games, they're clearly playing better football right now. What does it look like?
You say that, but Russell Wilson yards per pass attempt in weeks 1, 2, and 3, 5.2 is bad, 9.6, 8.1. Week 4, it's 8.0. He threw for 300 yards in week 2 and week 3. He threw for 223 yards in week 4. Since then, this past week against the Vikings, 7.4 yards per attempt, 259 yards. His only game since week 4 with more than 200 yards passing. 198, 123, 194, 95 on 4.3 yards per pass attempt against the Chiefs in that first game. 196. He hasn't had more than 7 yards of pass attempt until this last week, since week 4 as well. His average depth of target in weeks 2 and 3 were 11.7 and 11.4. The last few weeks, 6.7, 3.6 against Buffalo. They beat Buffalo with him throwing the ball less than 4 yards downfield on average. 6.7, 6.6, 6.5, 6.4, 7. Your eyes are deceiving you about Russell Wilson. It is Sean Payton holding his hand all the way around the park, and this team getting turnovers and winning games.
That's fine, but why do you see Sean Payton retiring tomorrow?
I don't see it happening. I don't see them getting going 3-0 in turnovers with the Vikings. I don't see that happening every game.
They are plus 10 in the turnover differential over the last 3 weeks. I mean, that is clearly not going to continue. That is driving it, but they're not turning it over, right? Like, and they're gaining confidence, right?
They're running it more.
Yeah, the running game is better for sure.
They're going to play the Browns. Okay, they're going to go to the Texans, which CJ.
Will they cross the 50 against the Browns?
They may win 6-3 if they don't.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, how many quarterbacks, would you trust right now in the AFC ahead of him, who are left playing?
Herbert, Mahomes, Allen, that are left playing. Yeah, I'm blanking a little bit.
Trevor Lawrence.
We're not asking.
Trevor Lawrence, yes, Trevor Lawrence.
Stroud, baby.
We're
Stroud,
not.
it's 100% Stroud.
I like Stroud too, but he's turning the ball over. That's coming back around. He's throwing some picks. Tua's a good one. But the question isn't, are the Broncos winning the Super Bowl? The question is, can they back ass to the 7 seed?
I think
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I'm happy for them, and I'm happy for Sean Payton, but I don't think they're getting turnovers and turning those turnovers into 3 points and winning games by 1 point because the other team steps on their own junk at the end of these games. That's what's happening, right? If the Bills can put 1 foot in front of the other, or frankly, their 12th man could put 1 foot behind another and get off the field, they win that game. The Vikings win that game with a moderate game management at the end.
I'm fine if you're going to turn around and tell me that the Chargers will right the ship and they are the team that will make it. Because either we're going to hold the Chargers accountable for not being able to win close games, or we're going to give credit to the Broncos for getting
we hold the Chargers. Who on this show, Petro? If I'm a politician, I run on the platform of holding the Chargers accountable. I hold the Chargers more accountable than anybody.
I know, and you're right. They're 4-6. You are being proven right. But that to me then says that the teams that do find those ways to win, you have to give some credibility to. And that would be the Broncos. I mean, I disagree. Okay.
It's just like in the draft where statistically there's no such thing as a steal, and there's every bit the thing is a reach, right? Like that's my former Timo Risky, data scientist at PFF found that. I do think that there are teams that I do think luck is asymmetric. I think teams like the Chargers make their own dumb ass luck all the time, and I think the teams that get good luck, like Denver, I don't think there's anything special Denver's doing to elicit like the good fortune here. I do think it's asymmetric though, which is why I'm less likely to look at a team like Buffalo or like Los Angeles and say this team's coming because the things are going to regress. No, I do think that I think there's some asymmetry to luck.
All right, so he's hating on the Broncos. Jeff, I'm going to read these teams. You tell me which one of these teams they can't beat. Browns at home. I mean, by home, I mean in Denver.
Across the 50.
At the Texans. At the Chargers. At the Lions.
Well,
that's
the one they could lose to.
Right? Patriots at home. Chargers at home. At the Raiders. I mean.
Yeah. That's maybe two more losses.
Just getting now used to looking at the Lions on the schedule.
It's a 10-win season right there.
I know that looks 10-winish to me, and so they're going to get a chance to have a head-to-head win against the Browns. That's going to be a big part of it. They get the Chargers, who, according to you, will find a way to lose both those games, right? So I mean, it's definitely on the table. The Texans, a head-to-head game against the Texans, that's going to be a tiebreaker.
Better quarterback in Houston. Better quarterback in that game.
Long term for sure. I agree. But
tortoise in the hair, Eric.
Yeah. I think you might give him a little bit more credit. Gann Asphalt and Concrete proudly brings you our Too Deep NFL podcast. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Is Myles Garrett going to break the sack record, Jeff?
Got a good shot at it. He'll have opportunities. They're going to be on the field a lot with that backup quarterback play. But yeah, he's having a monster year. And look, at some point, you had to find somebody to give the mantle of best defensive player in the game to. That wasn't named Aaron Donald, and he's it now. I mean, there's people who, I thought Michael Parsons would be the runaway defensive player of the year, and Myles Garrett has lapped him 3 or 4 times now. Maybe TJ Watt's in the conversation. But what he's doing for that defense, how Jim Schwartz has unleashed him in that scheme, he was always a great player. But now you're talking about, is this guy a future Hall of Fame player? Just the things he's doing. And legitimately, we talked about the MVP race. It's like legitimately, he should be in that conversation.
Yes,
because especially with they've had a backup quarterback playing in almost half their games. And to be sitting here at 7-3 and the things he's doing, I think he's the most dominant defensive player in the game right now.
22.1 sacks he is on pace for right now, Eric. Does he break the sack record?
I don't think so. I think that the stuff that Jeff talked about, that they're going to be playing themselves with a backup, which means they're going to try to lengthen games. They're going to, if the backup isn't as good, then they're going to be behind in games, which means there's going to be less passes against them, especially as ferocious as that defense is. I think teams are going to play them like the Steelers play them, which is just like grind it out type of games where you're just going to get fewer opportunities than he otherwise would. So I'm going to say no, but I obviously am rooting for it. It'd be fun to see. I agree with Jeff. I think he's not the MVP of the league, but he's in the conversation, which is a lot to say for a non-quarterback.
Yeah. Micah Parsons did have 2.5 sacks last week. He's at 10 now. Your sack leaders right now. Myles Garrett, 13. Donnell Hunter has 12. 11.5 for TJ Watt. Khalil Mack, 11. Max Crosby, 10.5. Kayvon Thibodeau finally arriving as the draft pick that
right on time.
10.5, right? The other team's offense is
sacks in NFL right now.
The other team's offense is on the field for 40 minutes, so you got to be able to pile up some sacks right there. Joe Burrow is done, Jeff, for this year. Where's the Bengals Super Bowl window look to you right now? Is that going to close a lot faster than any Bengal fan wants to admit?
They're still, I think, in pretty good shape next season. I mean, because they've drafted so well. They've been smart with their personnel moves. They have a lot of cap space, but it's going to get eaten up real fast here with some of the, obviously they just signed Burrow and they're going to have to sign Jamar Chase, and we'll see what I think T. Higgins is leaving town, but they've got a good culture now, which is, you never say that about the Bengals for most of the past 3 or 4 decades. And so they've got, I think, a belief. Having Burrow puts him in the same category as the Chiefs. If he, as long as he's on the field, you got a chance to do big things. So I'm not really going to say they're in this place where they missed their best shot at a championship. He gives them a seat at the table every year. I just don't know if I worry about the injuries, the way they've racked up with him, because every year now there's been something going on with him. And it's, I mean, that one last, this wrist thing was just weird. Like, I never seen that happen to a quarterback in a game like that, where all of a sudden he just throws a ball and he's just like, God, my wrist just snapped here. Like, I'm still waiting to hear the story behind what was going on there. There had to be something going on earlier in the week that led to that. But he gets hurt a lot. And so that's the only thing I worry about with him, is just his durability.
Yeah, the cap is doable. I mean, it doesn't look there are other teams that look like they're going to get hit with an avalanche of cap here before long. They're not one of them.
No.
There is a scenario where they could get Higgins, but I think you're right. I think he probably wants to go be a number one somewhere and not be in the shadow of Jamar Chase, but keeping Tyler Boyd would be something that would be a good idea. But it is, I mean, we had the Tommy said it, he's missed 2 of the last 4 years. He can't get to the season healthy, and those injuries start to pile up. Andrew Luck got beat to hell. Like,
Carson Wentz.
Yeah. I don't think we're seeing, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady in their late 30s with Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes the way a lot of people thought we might 2 years ago, right? This is one where I think a little bit the size thing matters. And frankly, for Chiefs fans, don't get too excited, because Patrick Mahomes gets banged up. He guts through a lot of them, but I guarantee you, like, his range of motion on the ankle is a little less than it was last year, and a little less than it was, when he came into the league, because he had the ankle injury back in 2019 and the kneecap injury. Like, these smaller guys take the hits. They get knocked, they get pinballed around a little bit more, and Burrow's taking a lot of them. I mean, where do you put their window at?
Well, and Burrow's not physically gifted enough to overcome injuries that he can play through. Like, when the calf injury, he doesn't have the arm strength to overcome that. When Justin Herbert had broken ribs last year, he was still throwing lasers. It wasn't as good, but he can overcome that with arm strength. Joe Burrow, people forget, first 3-4 games of the season, he had the lowest yards per attempt in NFL history over that course of time. He was just starting to hit his stride again. It's a concern, right? Because to win in the AFC and to win in the playoffs, consistently, who has done that over the last 25 years? Kansas City, New England, Indianapolis, on the NFC side, San Francisco, but even San Francisco's gotten the Super Bowl once over the past little bit, because they don't play home games in the playoffs. The teams that make it to the Super Bowl consistently, that are consistently in the mix, that can be in the conversation with teams like the Chiefs and the Patriots, you got to play home playoff games. And if your quarterback is only at his top physical shape, 12 out of 17 games a year, 9 out of 17 games a year. This is the issue. Imagine if Mahomes was hurt right now for the Chiefs, how much more of a disaster it'd be. Once Burrow has to deal with a Higgins injury, or they lose T. Higgins and Chase gets hurt. What if they're going to see what they see in Kansas City over and over and over again, and that's going to lead to a lot of 10-7 seasons. And that's not going to be good enough to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs.
I'm not saying that Joe Burrow is going to win 4 championships, but if you want a player comp, isn't Joe Montana maybe better than Brady? One, he's only about 6'2", which is where Montana was. Montana was able to stay healthier when he was younger, but then they had Steve Young to fill in all those games. I think the Bengals would be wise to invest in a quality backup quarterback, because I got it when. And a lot of people lost their mind when I'm like, I understand why Mike Shanahan took another quarterback after RG3. He was hurt his whole college career. He's going to be hurt in the pros. You need Kirk Cousins. That's not a bad idea to have a guy that can step in there. The Bengals are kind of looking like that's how it's going to be with Joe Burrow. They would be wise to make sure that they invest $7-8 million in a quality number 2 quarterback, because, hopefully he's not done for the year hurt, but he's probably going to miss 4 or 5 games every year.
Yeah. And it really, and teams don't like doing that, because some teams are just cheap. Some teams just don't want to invest that kind of money. And some quarterbacks get a little bit cranky about seeing guys who can give them a run for their money if they get hurt, hanging around the locker room. So I understand. I understand
Like
that
Joe
argument as well.
Montana. Like
Yeah.
Joe Montana did with Steve Young.
Yeah, like Brett
They
Favre.
invited him to his retirement party.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, but you're right. There is. We want to believe these younger guys who are way more athletic and making the game more fun to watch with the way they move around are a different breed, but they're also a lot more vulnerable to playing a lot short, having shorter careers. I mean, really, if you want to play 20 years in the league, you got to be like Tom Brady sitting behind the offensive line, not running around, or Peyton Manning, or
Big Ben.
Yeah, Big Ben. Yeah, Big Ben. Look at exactly. And Big Ben was a specimen, so he could actually move around earlier in his career. But there's a reason why Dak Prescott doesn't want to run as much anymore. There's a reason why Jalen Hurts doesn't want to run as much anymore, because not only is it dangerous for them, but their coaches, their franchises recognize that you get hurt, it's over for us. And so there is a line you got to walk when you're that kind of player.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, let's talk about what we want to see, or what we're looking to see here in week number 12, the Thanksgiving weekend upon us. Packers, Lions, Commanders, Cowboys, Niners, Seahawks. Those are our Thursday games. Eric, let's start with you. What are you looking at? What game or situation is jumping out at you for this week?
I don't really like this one from a betting perspective. Like I don't see an edge. It's a point spread of 1, and I see it. Jacksonville at Houston is the low-key best game of the weekend.
Yeah, I agree. I love it.
A total of 48 is the highest, 48.5 with Washington and Dallas. But like this is Jacksonville got spanked by Houston at home in the previous part. Houston wins this game, it's a first-place tie. If Jacksonville wins it, they kind of clinch the division. So it's a huge game.
Yeah. By the way, how about the Jags thought they were ready for a decade of dominance in their division, and now they've got to hold off the Texans in week 12, or they'll be looking up at the Houston Texans already. Talk about it.
That's Chiefs, right? Like that when you get a quarterback, and Stroud's not as good as Mahomes, but like when you get a quarterback that has a clue, it all looks up now, right? All of a sudden, Tank Dell looks like a good player. Noah Brown looks like a good player.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, what are you looking for in week 12?
Dak Prescott. I just mentioned him. Want to see him on Thanksgiving. He's going against a Commanders team that is starting to fade away around and very on the hot seat. But, man, he's been playing some of the best football of his life. 14 touchdowns, two interceptions the last 5 games. And I think he's in the MVP conversation if he can keep this going and can actually end up winning some big games down the stretch. So I want to see if he keeps this going.
I will tell you that I absolutely refuse to watch the Dolphins and Jets on Black Friday. Like, I am not going to watch the Jets in prime time unless I look at halftime and this game is tied. But
it's like 2:00 in the afternoon, isn't it? Here,
Soren is going to turn his back on the morally onerous Jets-Dolphins game and go to the mall on Black Friday.
I have to do ESPN radio Friday night, and I'm.
You want to guess? Can I guess? Can I call in?
I'll see if I can get it done. I'm not the lead guy. I don't think. I don't know who it is. I'll have to look at that when I get closer. But I don't even want to watch it, and I have to. I know you. I'm
talking about it.
You know what it is being on ESPN, Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
The Jets are going to be a topic after they just played that afternoon.
Here's our rundown.
The Jets just fell 13-3. Tim Boyle's first start at the Meadowlands. Right. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I object. I refuse. Yeah. Listen, I'd love to tell you some Pats Giants. It's really got my favorite, and it does. That's a battle for a draft pick right there. Can Bill Belichick get out of the way?
But speaking of that, like, where are we at with the draft? First overall pick in the draft, like,
it's the Panthers right now.
No, I mean, who'd we pick? I took the Giants, but who'd you take?
I'll have to go back here. Let me look. How many weeks ago did we do that? I have it all here on the notes.
Like 4 weeks ago.
Let me see. Give me a second here.
I think we're pretty even right now, aren't we?
Who did you have, Jeff?
I think I had the Giants.
Eric, do you remember who you took?
For the first overall pick?
Yeah.
Arizona.
I took the Bears.
And nobody took Carolina.
Well, I took the Bears. I took the Bears because they have Carolina.
Carolina's. Okay. Well.
Yeah, that was one of my reasons for taking it. But For some reason, I'm not finding. I'm all the way back in here in September on the rundowns, and
Nah, it's not big.
but yeah,
I know it's a pretty tight race right now we're running here.
oh God, there's a lot of crap. There's a lot of crap down at the bottom. There's no doubt about that. Listen, so again, I always do like the dogs. Browns Broncos, man, like that's like a playoff. I'm telling you, they're like really good games that are kind of shaping up that are there. But come on, Ravens Chargers. Like I want to see the Chargers lose at the end again, and Brandon Staley continue to say nothing needs to be changed. Like that's the key, isn't it? It's some Ravens Chargers.
He looks like the overzealous geology teacher at an incredulous student. Like he just, that like sternness he had with Daniel Popper was certainly something on Sunday.
But I do think there's some pressure on the Ravens. Like, don't go screw this up. Nobody wants to play the Chargers because, like, oh, big, strong quarterback, weapons, talented players on defense. But damn, we're supposed to win this thing, and we're supposed to win it easy. The Ravens are now sitting in the 1 seed.
Here's your shot.
Yeah,
got a feeling it might be one of those. The Ravens lose those games like 4 times a year, right? It could be this one.
Yeah. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions. In-house crews, they give you a written warranty on every project. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. There you go, Tommy. One more for you to put on the tally board. That's going to do it for us. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Enjoy some family, some friends. Certainly enjoy some football. We're thankful for everybody who consumes our Too Deep podcast. Also, our Chiefs podcast. We do Red, Gold, and Bold. If you haven't checked that out, go ahead and look for that on your podcasts as well. But everybody have a great Thanksgiving, and we will talk with you as we get ready for Week 13 here on the Too Deep NFL podcast.